Human freight pilot saved a child, not knowing who watched from the shadows. Dust from the mines of Vespera. 4 clung to everything, seeping into the skin and spirit of anyone who called the barren moon home. Mason's hands were already stained from the morning's work as he knelt beside the battered hull of his freighter, running diagnostics through a flickering handheld. The ship was a patchwork of old alloys and newer scars, stubbornly holding together out of sheer will and Mason's own refusal to let anything, machine or man, beat him. The air tasted metallic, thick with grit that settled on the rows of landing pads stretching into the horizon. Mason spat into the dust and slapped the side of his vessel, listening to the hum of overworked systems. Another day, another run for the mining syndicate. He ferried ore, supplies, sometimes even bodies, up to the orbital docks where men in clean uniforms signed for deliveries they never saw. A tremor ran through the ground, faint at first, but quickly growing into a deep, shuddering groan that rattled through Mason's boots. He looked up, squinting toward the distant excavation pits where a haze of gray hung perpetually over the surface. The tremor ended in a muffled roar, followed by a silence more ominous than noise. Another collapse. Mason set his jaw, eyes narrowing as alarms began to blare from the comm towers along the ridge. He turned back to his ship, determined not to get involved. Heroics had a price, and he had paid it dearly, too many times. The universe rewarded pragmatism, not sentiment. His finger hovered over the ignition switch, already anticipating the familiar thrum beneath his seat. That was when the comms crackled, a faint voice breaking through the static, high-pitched, trembling, desperate. "Please, help! Trapped! Can't move! It hurts!" Mason froze. Children weren't supposed to be anywhere near the deep shafts. He glanced at the comm panel, heart thumping. The authorities would be slow, the rescue bots slower. His mind flashed to another collapse, another set of eyes wide with terror, but he shoved the memory away. Still, the voice pressed in, fragile and pleading, and something old and stubborn in him broke free. He slammed his fist on the console. "Damn it," he muttered, swinging into the pilot's chair. The freighter's engines screamed as he powered them to redline, skidding across the pad toward the disaster site. The radio burst to life with the foreman's voice, core, all bluster and fear. "Mason, stand down! That's an active collapse zone. You'll make it worse!" Mason ignored him, pushing the ship low over the rubble, sensors pinging warnings he disregarded. The authorities' voices joined the chorus, issuing orders he would never follow. He dropped the freighter's landing struts, using the ship's bulk as a brace to shift the heaviest debris aside. Alarms blared as he vented thrusters, carving a precarious passage through the wreckage. Heat shimmered in the air, dust and grit swirling in the artificial gale. Reckless, yes, but sometimes recklessness was all that stood between life and death. He leapt from the cockpit, scrambling into the narrow, smoking crevice he'd created. Mason crawled through the darkness, his breath harsh, one hand groping ahead. The ground trembled again, threatening to bury him alive, but he pressed on. A small figure huddled beneath a slab of rock, skin an otherworldly shade of violet, eyes wide with terror and pain. Mason's chest tightened. "Hey, kid," he said softly, inching closer. "I'm here. We're getting out together." The child whimpered, her face streaked with dust and blood. Mason wedged his shoulder under the slab, teeth gritted and heaved. The rock shifted enough for him to pull her free, wrapping her trembling body in his arms as the tunnel groaned above them. A fresh shower of pebbles rained down. Mason shielded the girl, grunting as he took the brunt of the collapse on his back. He crawled backward, inch by inch, until daylight bled through the fissure. They spilled into the open, both gasping, Mason's heart hammering. He barely had time to catch his breath before a shadow detached itself from the chaos. Tall, armored, in iridescent plating, Syrah moved with a predatory grace. A Zirian sentinel, her bearing unmistakable, her amber eyes sharp and assessing. Her voice was cold as she stepped forward. That child is under my protection. Hand her over. Mason straightened, shifting the girl behind him. She's terrified. Give her a moment. Syrah's jaw tightened. On Zyre, males obeyed without question. Her hand hovered near the hilt of her sidearm, a warning Mason didn't miss. Still, the girl, Lyra, if he remembered the voice from the comms, clung to his sleeve, eyes pleading. She trusts me, Mason said quietly but firmly. Right now, that matters. Syrah's gaze flicked from Lyra to Mason, weighing her options. Her own vehicle, Mason noted, was a smoking ruin half buried in rubble. Whatever she'd planned, it was unraveling fast. Very well, she said at last, her tone clipped. You want compensation? I'll pay you to safeguard us until retrieval. She named a sum that made Mason's breath hitch. A fortune by any standard. Enough to buy a new ship or a new life. He almost walked away. He tried to turn, to tell her no, but Syrah's lips curled in a faint, knowing smile. Coalition Engineering Corps. Former lieutenant, decorated for bravery. You know chaos. You survived it. Mason stiffened. His history was a wound, and she had found it. Lyra's grip tightened, her violet eyes shining with silent trust, and Mason realized he was already committed. He nodded, voice rough. My ship, my rules. Syrah inclined her head, accepting the terms. For now, she would cede command. The uneasy trio hustled toward the battered freighter, dust swirling in their wake. Suspicion, gratitude, and a dozen unspoken questions hung in the cramped air as Mason powered up the engines and lifted them away from the ruins, into the unknown, together. The cockpit became a crucible of clashing worldviews. Mason's hands moved across a chaos of jury-rigged controls and cracked monitors, every surface cluttered with tools and personal relics from 100 desperate repairs. Wires dangled like jungle vines, patched with scavenged connectors and wrapped in faded tape. Syrah hovered behind him, her posture rigid, eyes scanning every flickering screen and blinking light with silent judgment. Her fingers itched to bring order to the mess, to impose the discipline she breathed like air. But Mason's domain was built from improvisation and necessity, a puzzle she could not solve. Lyra, swaddled in a thermal blanket, watched the adults with wide, uncertain eyes. Syrah fastened her carefully into the jump seat, checking the straps twice before brushing a stray lock of silver hair from the child's forehead. Is this secure enough? She demanded, glancing at Mason. He offered a brief, humorless smile. She'll hold. These seats survived worse than a few bumpy landings. Syrah bristled, but said nothing more. She remained standing, never quite at ease, as the freighter hurtled through Vespera's fractured night, heading for their first stop, a fueling depot tucked into the perpetual shadow of the moon's northern ravines. The depot loomed into view, its spires and walkways coated in black grime, floodlights casting long, eerie shadows. Mason landed with a practiced thud, scanning the docking bay through the viewport. Something felt wrong. There were too many idle loaders, too few workers. Silence, in a place like this, was never a good sign. He flicked a switch, voice low. Something's off. Syrah, take Lyra. Lock yourselves in the cargo bay. Don't open up unless you hear my voice, twice. Syrah hesitated, torn between her urge to command and his clear, unspoken warning. But Lyra was already clutching her hand, trust and fear mingling in her gaze. Do as he says, Mason pressed. Syrah nodded, ushering Lyra out. As the hatch slid shut behind them, Mason drew his sidearm from under the pilot's seat. He exhaled, steadying his nerves, then moved through the freighter's side hatch and into the maze of machinery beyond. The air inside the depot was cold and metallic, echoes bouncing off rusted steel. Mason kept to the shadows, boots silent on the grated floor. He spotted them, a handful of syndicate thugs, weapons half concealed beneath their coats, eyes scanning for any sign of movement. They hadn't seen him yet. He circled behind a stack of oxygen tanks, heart pounding in his ears. Rather than face them head-on, he flicked a switch on a nearby console, sending a mechanical loader lurching to life. The machine belched steam and clanged down the corridor, drawing the attackers' attention. Mason darted behind them, using their confusion as cover. Shots rang out, ricocheting off girders. Mason ducked, slamming a fire suppression lever as he passed. White foam erupted, blinding the goons. In the chaos, he disabled one with a blow to the head, another with a well-placed kick to the knees. The third spun and fired wild, missing Mason by inches as he melted into the shadows. From a narrow viewport in the cargo bay, Syrah watched, breath caught in her throat. Mason was unpredictable, never where an opponent expected, never following the rules of engagement she'd trained for. He moved like a ghost through the machinery, dismantling their ambush with ruthless ingenuity. Alarm warred with something else, an unwilling admiration for his cunning. A sudden sharp crack split the air. Syrah's eyes widened as she saw a fourth figure emerge on a catwalk above, leveling a rifle at the ship. The sniper's scope glinted as he took aim, right at Lyra's seat, visible through the cockpit glass. "Get down!" Mason roared, sprinting for the open ramp. He threw himself between the rifle and the girl, just as the sniper fired. The energy bolt hissed through the air, searing Mason's shoulder with white-hot agony. He barely felt himself hit the deck, but instinct propelled him onward. He scrambled up, teeth gritted, one hand pressed to the smoking wound, and lurched back inside the ship. The attackers scattered, their plan in shambles. Mason sealed the hatch behind him, blood slick on his palm, and staggered toward the cockpit. Syrah and Lyra met him in the corridor, their faces pale. "You're hurt," Syrah said, voice trembling beneath her control. "Just a scratch," Mason lied, but his vision blurred. Lyra reached for him with tiny, shaking fingers. Syrah guided him into the co-pilot's chair, her cool green hands surprisingly gentle as she cut away the scorched fabric. She pulled out a medkit, working quickly and efficiently, but her touch lingered over the old scars beneath the new wound. Pale lines crisscrossing his skin, each a testament to pain survived. "Hold still," she murmured, dabbing antiseptic along the burn. Her face was close, eyes intent, but there was a softness there, a question she could not quite ask. Mason winced as she wrapped his shoulder. "You missed your calling. Should have been a medic." She almost smiled. "On Zyre, sentinels must be healers as well as warriors. We have no luxury for specialists." For a moment, their defenses slipped. Syrah's fingers traced the stories etched in Mason's flesh. Old injuries, each with a history, each a chapter of endurance. He let her, breathing through the pain, surprised at how her touch soothed something deeper than the wound. Their eyes met. Syrah's composure wavered, replaced by vulnerability. Mason saw something raw in her gaze, a loneliness he recognized all too well. But there was no time for more. The ship's sensors blared a warning, a pulse signal sweeping for their location. Syndicate reinforcements were coming. Mason pushed himself upright, jaw set. "We need to disappear. Now." He guided the ship from the bay, weaving through the ravines and volcanic spires until the world outside was nothing but jagged stone and sulphurous mist. They found sanctuary in a hidden ravine, the ship nestled between ancient lava flows. Here, cloaked in darkness, they waited, watchful, hunted. The days that followed bled into each other, time marked only by the muted routine. Mason repaired the scorched hull by starlight, his movements careful despite his wounded shoulder. Syrah kept watch, her senses sharp, but she also began to observe Mason anew. She noted the way he comforted Lyra after her nightmares, his quiet patience as he answered the child's endless questions, the way he coaxed laughter from her with stories of old ships and distant stars. Syrah had never known a male like him. On Zyre, males submitted or rebelled, rarely both, never this blend of strength and gentleness, cunning and compassion. Mason did not challenge her authority, but neither did he defer. He was simply present, unyielding as the hull he maintained. At night, silence pressed in, heavy with unspoken truths. Syrah often found herself awake, watching Mason as he sat by the faint blue glow of a control panel, lost in thought. She wondered about the scars she had seen, the wounds no healer could mend. One evening, as volcanic storms raged beyond their shelter, Lyra crept from her bunk, drawn by the tension that hung between her protectors. She climbed into the narrow space between them, reaching out with her small, delicate hands. "Don't be sad," she whispered. Her voice trembled with power, her violet eyes shining in the dark. A pulse of warmth spread through the room, an empathic surge, raw and unfiltered. Mason's breath caught as memories crashed into him. The Kestrel disaster, screams in the dark, the crush of metal, his own helplessness as friends died around him. He relived the hours trapped in wreckage, the decision that saved him but doomed others, the guilt that never left. Syrah staggered, her mind awash with Mason's grief. Then her own surfaced, the endless solitude of command, the burden of being sentinel, the isolation that came with strength. Beneath it, something else, yearning, fierce and forbidden, for this human who confounded every expectation. The link snapped. Lyra slumped, exhausted, but a strange peace settled over them. Their secrets were laid bare, wounds exposed, shame and longing mingling in the quiet. Mason looked at Syrah, and for the first time she did not look away. Their barriers were gone, dissolved in the aftermath of Lyra's gift. Syrah spoke first, her voice low. "You survived more than most, but you never let yourself heal." He answered, equally soft. "And you carry burdens alone, afraid to let anyone share them." In the dim light, truth flowed between them, stories of war and duty, of fear and hope. Mason spoke of the Kestrel, the friends he'd lost, the emptiness he carried like a shadow. Syrah spoke of home, of tradition's iron grip, of dreams she buried for the sake of others. They listened, each word forging a link stronger than any chain. That night, as the storm outside faded to a gentle hiss, Syrah reached out. Her hand trembled as it found Mason's, her touch hesitant but sincere. He did not pull away. Instead, he drew her closer, letting her warmth chase the cold from his bones. In that fragile intimacy, surrounded by darkness and danger, they found solace. A quiet passion bloomed in the shadows, two souls, scarred but not broken, daring at last to hope for something more. The atmosphere in the cockpit shifted. Silence, once sharp with suspicion, became comfortable, charged with new warmth. Mason moved about his controls with a quiet confidence, and Syrah, who had once regarded every improvised panel and patch with a soldier's disdain, now watched his hands with something close to admiration. Her own rigid discipline softened, little by little, as she let herself lean closer, let herself laugh when Mason muttered curses at flickering readouts. Lyra played at their feet, the child's laughter and bright questions a living link between their worlds, her small hands sometimes tugging at Syrah's sleeve, sometimes at Mason's, always seeking the security of their presence. They worked together, recalibrating the freighter's ailing systems. Mason knelt beneath a console, voice muffled as he explained the tangle of wires and jerry-rigged circuits. "See this?" He tapped a blue-stripped cable. "Keeps the thruster array from overloading. Had to splice it with a nav relay after the mainboard fried. Not pretty, but it works." Syrah crouched beside him, her movements precise. "On Zyre, we use logic lattice routing. Fail-safes at every junction." She held up a gleaming module, then pressed it gently into Mason's hand. "Try this. It's cleaner." He studied the part, then grinned. "You make order out of chaos. I make chaos run on time." Their hands brushed as he took the module, the contact electric, neither of them moving away. Lyra peeked under the console, giggling. "You're both silly," she declared. Later, as they gathered around the nav display to plot their route, The dynamic had shifted. Gone was the friction of authority and challenge. Instead, they strategized as equals. Sira drew up a schematic, her fingers dancing over the glowing interface. The direct approach is shortest, but too exposed. Syndicate sensors here and here. Mason leaned in, tracing an alternate path with a grease-stained finger. Maintenance shafts. This sector's been ignored for years. Security's a joke. We go in quiet, loop around the blockades, less glory, fewer bullet holes. Sira studied the plan, then nodded. Clever. We'll need to synchronize power cycles so their cameras don't pick up movement. I can do that remotely. He smiled at her. See? Teamwork. It was the first time she had ever deferred to a male's strategy, but she did so easily now, surprising herself. Respect for Mason's unconventional methods grew, as did her trust. Their teamwork became seamless, a blend of her Zyrian order and his human improvisation, the edges between them blurring as necessity forged partnership. Still, trouble pressed in from every angle. Supplies were dwindling. The ship's main batteries flickered dangerously low, and without new power cells, they wouldn't survive another escape. Mason stared at the dwindling charge with a frown. "We're running on hope and spit," he muttered. Sierra scrolled through local maps. "There's an abandoned relay station north of the lava flats. It should have what we need." Mason considered it, brow furrowed. "That sector's crawling with syndicate patrols." "Then we take them head on." Sierra's tone was clipped, battle-hardened. "Fast and direct. Take them before they know we're there." He shook his head. "Direct means casualties, ours or theirs. Let's try something different." They argued softly, their voices low but urgent, until Mason's eyes lit with mischief. "Trust me. Sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun." He spent the next hour hunched over the comm panel, fingers flying across controls as he reprogrammed the station's ancient systems. Sira watched, skeptical, but said nothing. When they arrived, the relay station loomed dark and silent. Syndicate thugs patrolled the perimeter, bored and restless. Mason flicked a switch, and suddenly, the old structure came alive with flickering lights, groaning metal, and distorted echoes, wailing voices that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. Shadowy holograms flickered in the corridors, half-glimpsed figures darting just out of sight. The patrols panicked. "This place is haunted!" one shouted, dropping his weapon as he stumbled for the exit. Another fired blindly at a spectral shape, eyes wide with terror. "No way, I'm dying for this. Let the bosses send bots." Within moments, the station was deserted, the syndicate goons fleeing into the mist. Mason grinned as the echoes faded, then slipped inside with Sira and Lyra at his heels. They moved quickly, salvaging power cells and anything else they could carry. Sira stared at Mason, shaken by how effortlessly he had overturned her expectations. "You won without violence," she murmured as they loaded the last crate. He shrugged, sweat streaking his brow. "Fear's a better motivator than pain. Sometimes you just need to know what people are really afraid of." She fell silent, her worldview shifting. On Zyre, deception was dishonor, yet Mason's cunning had spared lives, protected Lyra, and ensured their mission's success. For the first time, she wondered if order without flexibility was simply another kind of blindness. They returned to the ship, recharged, and ready for the final leg. The route ahead was perilous. The Scythe ravines, a maze of knife-edged cliffs and shifting shadows, led to the extraction site where Sira's command would retrieve them. The silence in the cockpit grew tense as the looming reality pressed down. Sira checked the nav again, then spoke quietly, her words carrying more weight than any she'd uttered before. "When we reach my command, my superiors will see everything. They'll know about you." Her hand trembled as she adjusted the controls. For a Zyrian woman to choose a human male, for love, it's nearly unthinkable. I would be questioned, perhaps disgraced. You would be studied, or worse. Mason sat back, the meaning settling between them like a storm on the horizon. He was silent for a long moment, staring at the stars beyond the cockpit glass. Lyra, sensing the tension, pressed her small hand into Mason's. Syrah's eyes shimmered with fear and hope in equal measure. He finally spoke, voice rough but certain. "I care more about where you're going than where I was headed." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing, warm and steady. Syrah let herself lean into his touch, her armor slipping for good. "We don't know what's waiting for us." "No," Mason agreed, voice soft, "but we'll face it together." In that moment, amid the looming threat and uncertainty, they chose each other. The future was unknown, the odds grim, but for the first time, neither of them was alone. The ship thrummed beneath them, Lyra curled at their feet, and together they set their course into the Scythe ravines, toward whatever destiny awaited, bound not by fear, but by the hope they had forged in the crucible of danger and trust. The extraction site was a trap. Mason felt it the moment the freighter cleared the last curve of the Scythe ravines. The supposed landing zone, a wide shelf of basalt, ringed by craggy outcrops, looked too pristine, too still. Then, as if on cue, the calm crackled with static, and the canyon walls came alive with enemy fire. A thunderous roar split the air as an armored crawler rumbled into view, its hull bristling with cannons. Syndicate mercenaries swarmed the high ledges, rifles flashing in the gloom. Bolts hammered the freighter's shields, splintering rock and metal. Lyra yelped in terror, and Syrah pressed her close, shielding her body as the ship lurched. "Mason, there's no cover!" Syrah shouted, scanning the chaos for options. He twisted the freighter in a wild barrel roll, engines howling. "We make our own!" he barked, flicking switches and rerouting power on the fly. Sparks flew overhead as the ship scraped the ravine wall. Syrah braced herself, firing through the viewport at Syndicate gunners, every shot precise, a sentinel's discipline in perfect counterpoint to Mason's reckless maneuvers. Their partnership became a dance. Mason dodged a rocket blast, bringing the freighter's nose around just as Syrah snapped off a shot that took out a gunner's perch. The crawler, though, was a fortress. Its armor shrugged off everything the freighter could throw at it. Mason's jaw clenched. He knew what had to be done. He slammed the ship into a hard bank, warning lights flaring. "Out of options," he muttered. His fingers flew over the controls, rerouting auxiliary power into the thrusters and setting the navigation system to lock onto the armored blockade. Syrah, sensing the change in his posture, looked at him in alarm. "What are you doing?" He turned, sweat streaking his brow. "I'm giving you a chance. Syrah, take Lyra. Get out. Don't look back." She shook her head, fury and fear battling in her eyes. "That's suicide. There has to be another way." Mason pressed Lyra into her arms, his voice softer now. "You said yourself, protecting her is everything. You taught me that." Syrah's training screamed in protest, every instinct telling her to stay and fight. But the protective urge Mason had awakened in her, the drive to save, not just to serve, was stronger. She nodded, tears glinting, then scooped Lyra up and sprinted for the rear hatch. Mason watched her go, his heart hammering. He climbed onto the freighter's roof, bracing himself against the wind and heat. The ground below was a war zone, tracer fire streaking past as he laid down covering shots with the ship's mounted cannon. He saw Syrah, Lyra's head pressed into her shoulder, weaving through a hail of debris toward the dark edge of the canyon. The crawler's main cannon swung toward him. Mason locked the thrusters, set the last override, and leaped clear as the freighter roared forward, picking up speed, a wounded beast on a final charge. The Syndicate mercenaries scattered, realizing too late what was about to happen. The collision was cataclysmic. Metal shrieked as the freighter slammed into the crawler's flank. Flames erupted, a fireball swallowing both vehicles in a thunderous shockwave. The ground shook so violently that Syrah staggered, clutching Lyra as they shielded themselves behind a boulder. Heat and light washed over them, followed by silence so profound it rang in her ears. Smoke billowed from the wreck, painting the ravine in nightmarish hues. The only sound was Lyra's sobbing and the distant whine of incoming engines. The extraction shuttle appeared, sleek and silver, descending through the haze. Syrah stood, her body numb, heart in ruins. Mason, her Mason, was gone, his sacrifice burning behind her eyelids. Duty called, cold and insistent. She lifted Lyra, moving toward the waiting ramp. A shimmering hologram flickered into view, projected from the shuttle's command console. The Zyrian commander, draped in ceremonial armor, fixed Syrah with a steely gaze. "Status report, Sentinel Syrah. Explain this chaos." Syrah's voice was steady, belying the quaking of her soul. "Mission complete. The asset is safe." She hesitated, then lifted her chin. "I claim the human Mason as my personal retainer. He was instrumental to the operation. He is under my protection." The commander's eyes widened. "A human? A male? Syrah, such actions violate—" But Syrah did not flinch. Her grief was a blade, her resolve unbreakable. "I will answer for my choices. Mason belongs with us now." Before the commander could respond, Lyra twisted in Syrah's arms, pointing to the burning wreckage. "Look, there, someone's moving." Through the choking smoke, a figure staggered into view. Clothes scorched, blood painting his side, but unmistakably alive. Mason dragged himself clear of the ruined crawler, coughing, every step a testament to stubborn will. Syrah's heart leaped. "Drop the ramp," she ordered, voice ringing with an authority that brooked no challenge. The crew obeyed. Mason was hauled aboard, barely conscious but breathing. Syrah knelt beside him, hands gentle as she cradled his battered face. The commander's image flickered again, her composure shaken. "Sentinel Syrah, this is highly irregular." Syrah met her gaze without fear. "The asset is safe. I have acquired a new protector. His name is Mason. He is under my care." There was a long, stunned silence. The commander's image glitched, then faded, her shock plain. In the medbay, Mason lay on a sterile cot, the hiss of medical gel and the whir of scanners filling the air. Syrah sat by his side, her armor battered, hands trembling as she brushed a lock of hair from his brow. Lyra sat nearby, watching with solemn eyes, a silent witness to the miracle of survival. Mason blinked awake, vision blurred, pain blooming in every limb. But Syrah's face, framed by the soft glow of biolights, was the first thing he saw. "Did we make it?" he croaked, managing a lopsided smile. Syrah leaned closer, her touch reverent as she traced his jaw. "We did. The contract is fulfilled. You saved us all, Mason." He reached for her hand, finding it instantly, warmth flowing between them in the hush. "What happens now?" She smiled, her eyes bright with unshed tears and something fiercer, hope. "We'll see what the future holds." Mason squeezed her fingers, his old life fading into memory. He had found home, not in a place, but in the woman who had chosen him, and in the family they had forged together against every odd. 6 months later, Mason stood on a Zyrian terrace, the air as clear as mountain glass, and the city below a marvel of crystalline symmetry. Towers rose in precise geometric harmony, their facets catching the sunlight and scattering rainbows across the terraces and lush hanging gardens. The Zyrian capital was a place of engineered perfection, a world away from the battered moonscapes and grit-stained cargo bays that had shaped Mason's past. He leaned on the sculpted balustrade, watching as Lyra darted among the blossom-laden shrubs. The girl's laughter rang out, bright and unrestrained, as she chased a floating training drone through the gardens. She lunged, missed, then spun in delight, her arms thrown wide. Her violet skin glowed in the morning sun, eyes sparkling with confidence. Mason had taught her to embrace that laughter, to find joy, even when the world insisted on silence. The dust and bitterness of Vespera 4 had faded from him, shed like an old skin. He wore Zyrian garb now, pale, flowing fabric edged in blue, a sash marking his status as an honored retainer. Outsider though he remained, his hair too dark, his shoulders too broad, his manner too relaxed, he no longer cared about the stares that followed him through the city's gleaming corridors. He had found his place, not through acceptance, but through belonging. Syrah appeared at his side, the click of her boots softened by the garden's mossy paths. Her uniform was formal today, all iridescent lines and polished insignia, but her eyes softened as she drew near. Without hesitation, she leaned into Mason's side, her hand finding his. There was nothing furtive in the gesture, no shame, only a quiet intimacy that had grown from the wild passion of their beginning into a bond of unshakable devotion. "You look thoughtful," she teased, brushing a stray lock of hair from his brow. He gave her a crooked smile. "Just making sure I'm not dreaming. 6 months ago, I would have bet my last credit that I'd never see a place like this, or that someone like you would choose someone like me." Syrah's laughter was low, a private melody. "I didn't choose you for what you were. I chose you for what you make me want to become." Their peace was suddenly disturbed by the approach of two Zyrian guards, their armor glinting, ceremonial spears in hand. They moved with the measured precision of men trained to uphold order above all else. Their eyes flicked to Mason, one with open suspicion, the other with thinly veiled contempt. "Sentinel Syrah," the first guard intoned, bowing stiffly. "Your presence is requested at the archives." The second's gaze lingered on Mason. "Will the human be permitted inside the inner court? It is not customary for—" His tone left the rest unsaid, heavy with derision. Syrah's jaw tightened, her shoulders squaring. "He stands with me. His status is recognized by command." But before the guard could retort, Mason stepped forward, a gentle smile easing the tension. "Don't worry. I've already broken enough rules for one lifetime." He scanned the garden, then knelt, plucking a blossom from a bush near his feet. Its petals were imperfect, a single edge marred by a scarlet streak, the rest flawless white. He turned the flower in his fingers, then called to Lyra. "Hey, little star, catch!" He tossed the blossom, and Lyra snatched it from the air with a delighted squeal. She studied it, brow furrowed. "It's not perfect." Mason crouched to meet her gaze. "On my world, we cherish what's imperfect, what has a story. This little scar, it means the blossom survived the storm. That's what makes it special." The guards exchanged baffled glances. Syrah watched, pride warring with affection in her eyes. Mason's words hung in the air, their meaning unmistakable. Syrah had chosen him, the flaw in their perfect order, and that choice had value beyond rules or tradition. After a moment's silence, the guards bowed and withdrew, their confusion unresolved, but their authority unchallenged. When they were gone, Syrah stepped close, pressing her forehead gently to Mason's. The Zyrian gesture of unity, one she'd once reserved only for her own kind, was now reserved for him. "You've reshaped my world into something better," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. Mason's hand found the small of her back. "I just gave you permission to be imperfect," he murmured, grinning. "Turns out, it's contagious." She laughed, the sound soft and secret. Lyra danced around them, the blossom tucked behind her ear, her joy a living testament to all they had overcome. A chime sounded, clear and commanding, from the wall console at the terrace's edge. Syrah straightened, her features shifting into the poised mask of the sentinel. Mason squeezed her hand once before releasing it. They moved to the console together. The shimmering blue light of the commander's hologram appeared, regal in her ceremonial armor, gaze sharp as ever. "Sentinel Syrah, There's unrest in the Altair sector, a situation requiring your unique insight. Her gaze flicked to Mason, and there was no mistaking the weight of her words. And that of your retainer. The pause that followed was a challenge and a concession both, a recognition of the strength forged by their bond and the new order they represented. Syrah inclined her head. We are ready, Commander. Mason stood tall beside her, no longer just an outsider, but a partner, imperfect, stubborn, and utterly indispensable. As the hologram faded, Syrah turned to him, her eyes bright with anticipation. Ready for another adventure? He grinned, reaching for her hand as Lyra bounded to join them. With you? Always. Together, they stepped off the terrace, into uncertainty, into the city's light, into a future shaped not by tradition or flawlessness, but by the love and courage they had claimed as their own. As dusk fell, casting angular shadows across the city, Mason, Syrah, and Lyra gathered on the terrace, drawn together by instinct as much as intention. The crystalline spires of the Zyrian capital caught the last gold light, scattering it in fractured beams across the gardens, the city humming with the quiet pulse of evening. The air was cooler now, scented with alien blooms, and overhead, the sky melted from indigo to deep violet, the first stars peeking through. Mason felt the weight and wonder of it, the improbable journey that had brought him here, to this moment, with these people. The terrace, once cold and imposing, now felt like sanctuary. Lyra pressed in against his side, her arms looping around his waist, while Syrah stepped close, her hand fitting perfectly into his. They held each other, a silent acknowledgement of all they had survived and all they had become. A family, forged in adversity, now a lasting disruption to the Zyrian order. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Lyra, always restless, broke the silence with a soft laugh, reaching up to touch Mason's face. Are you sad, Mason? She asked, her voice threaded with concern. He smiled, shaking his head. Not anymore, little star. His gaze drifted past the city's flawless symmetry to the wild horizon beyond. I used to think this world was too perfect, that there was no place for someone like me, someone who's made mistakes, who isn't polished. Syrah's voice was gentle, threading through the dusk. Perfection is an illusion, Mason. Even the brightest crystal has fractures. It's the flaws that catch the light, that make it beautiful. She leaned into him, her dark hair spilling against his cheek, her arms circling Lyra's shoulders. Mason let himself feel it all, the solidity of Syrah at his side, the warmth of Lyra's small hand in his, the city below alive with the hum of 1,000 stories. He realized, with a sudden rush of certainty, that he was no longer haunted by the ghosts of Vespera IV or the scars of the Kestrel disaster. The weight that had pressed on his chest for years had lifted, replaced by something new: purpose, belonging, and love. He had become a partner, a protector, and, most unexpectedly, a father figure to the child who had, in her innocence and courage, united two worlds. Lyra's laughter was a bridge, her trust a bond stronger than any Zyrian code. From the edge of the terrace, Syrah glanced at the city's heart, where the glow of the council spire flickered. The commander's summons will come soon, she said quietly. There's unrest in Altair sector. A new mission. They want both of us, your insight and mine. Mason nodded, meeting her gaze. This time, we go as equals. Not as pilot and sentinel, not as outsider and warrior, but as a team, as family. Syrah smiled, the hard lines of her command softened by something fiercely tender. That was always the only way forward. Lyra twirled in a circle, the hem of her tunic catching the breeze. Does this mean I get to come too? She asked, looking hopefully between them. Mason ruffled her hair. If your mother says yes, then yes. Every adventure needs a clever navigator. Syrah's mouth twitched with amusement. And every mission needs a dose of chaos, just enough to keep us honest. They lingered as the city's lights began to shimmer, thousands of tiny points illuminating walkways, bridges, and gardens. The Zyrian capital was flawless in its design, a living sculpture of order and purpose. But Mason saw it now for what it truly was, a place made beautiful not by perfection, but by the unexpected, the imperfect, the human. He watched as Syrah gazed out over her city, her hand never leaving his. "Are you ready?" he asked softly. She turned to him, her eyes luminous in the gathering dark. "For anything, as long as you're at my side." He pulled her closer, his arms winding around her, anchoring them both. "I don't know what the future holds," he admitted, "but for the first time, I'm not afraid of it." Syrah pressed her forehead to his, a gesture of unity and promise. "We face it together, Mason, whatever comes." Lyra, sensing the gravity of the moment, squeezed between them, her laughter bubbling over. Mason laughed with her, the sound echoing softly down the terrace, a bright thread in the deepening night. From somewhere inside the residence, the chime sounded, low and resonant, the signal they had been waiting for. The commander's message, the next chapter. Mason met Syrah's eyes, and in them he saw everything he had ever searched for: understanding, resilience, hope. He reached for her hand, and she took it without hesitation. The city below glimmered, flawless and unchanging, but Mason knew the truth. It was their shared chaos, their chosen family, that made it truly alive. He drew Syrah close, her hair a silken curtain against his cheek, Lyra's arms looping around both of them. Together, they stood at the edge of the world, ready to face whatever might come. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, Mason welcomed it, knowing that whatever challenges came, he would face them not alone, but with the woman who had transformed his world. That's the end of the story. You can leave us a tip or become a channel member. This greatly helps our team improve the quality of our videos. You can send a tip using the Super Thanks button right below the video. We truly appreciate each and every one of you who has subscribed and supported us. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.